Welcome back to the Tech Leaders Talk podcast, where experts and leaders in the wide world of IT discuss the industry and hard-earned career wisdom with your host, Barry Newkirk. Today's guest on Tech Leaders Talk is Will Sprang. Will is a technology and business visionary with both executive and hands-on experience. Will has a strong record of success in implementing worldwide SAP systems and a proven ability to create robust IT architecture and infrastructures while actively managing both cost and risk. A talented leader with broad experience, Will consults in strategic planning, budget planning and oversight, project management, IT operations, and more.
I'm very pleased to welcome my good friend and collaborator, Will Sprang, to the Tech Leaders Talk podcast. Will has a long history in IT and some very interesting career stops. So, Will, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Barry. Excited to be here.
We are very excited as well. So we'll just jump right in as we typically do. These are conversations with folks who have achieved a certain level of success, and we're trying to use this as a mentor exemplar for younger folks in the IT industry. So, Will, as we get started, tell us, how'd you grow up? How'd you get started in technology?
Sure. Probably not a very conventional start, Barry. Born in South Dakota, grew up on a farm primarily for the first several years of my life, and moved to Amarillo, Texas, where I spent the rest of my youth growing up there. And of course, went through the normal childhood nerdy routines of working hard to save money to buy the latest electronic gadget or robot from Heath Zenith, I think it was called, or Commodore 64 or TRS-80 at the time. Radio Shack, unlike probably most of the kids at my age that time, was my store of choice. If I could go shopping on the weekend, kind of thing. So, but grew up with just probably insatiable curiosity and appetite for technology and what it would do, what it could do, and spent my years growing up there in Texas, and of course eventually graduated high school and joined the U.S. Army for a period of time. 3 years, where I spent a couple of years in Europe and then a year back in the United States. So yeah, that's kind of in a nutshell.
So Amarillo by morning, George Strait, big fan.
Exactly. Amarillo was the place, or actually we lived in a small area, a canyon, if you will, halfway between Amarillo and Canyon, Texas. So Canyon High School.
And where were you born in South Dakota?
I was born in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, but we lived in a small city called the Smet, which, if you're familiar with the Little House on the Prairie TV series back then, that's kind of where that whole thing was put together and filmed. The whole lore of it was Wilder.
Wow.
Wilder things. Cool. So, yeah, exciting times.
It sounded like you kind of caught the bug for tech middle school, high school. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah. I would say middle school, all the way through high school. It just, as soon as it was available, or I could get a book on something and read it and get my hands on it and play with it. I was always one of those, it wasn't cartoons weren't my thing. Comic books weren't my thing. Hands-on or vector sets, Lincoln Logs, building, deconstructing, anything I could do to tear something apart, figure out how it worked, and put it back together was my thing.
And so you graduated high school and you went in the Army. Were you an IT person in the Army, or did you do something different in the Army?
No, my mother worked her entire career in the judicial system, the federal judicial system. And another area of fascination for me, just from her telling her stories when she'd come home from work every day, was the whole legal side of the equation. So I oftentimes would go attend these federal trials and hearings, and there were some interesting cases that would come through these federal judges. And so I thought, I think law enforcement's kind of where I may want to head, what I want to do. So, of course, being young, 17 at the time, I think it was, you can't go into this federal type of law enforcement, FBI, Secret Service, U.S. Marshal Service, without being 21, having a college degree. And of course, then the other benefit was, if you had military service, that added points to your application for those types of careers. So I went into the military with two requests. One was to go into the military police and get that law enforcement experience there.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, to see the world, with guarantee that I would be outside of the U.S. So those two things happened. I've spent 3 years as a military policeman, and it was cool and it was exciting. But it wasn't my calling. I determined by the end of those 3 years.
Okay. Were you in Germany then?
I was in Germany for 2 years and then back in El Paso for a year. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And so you got out of the Army, an enlisted guy, you ETS'd as they say. I was enlisted in the Army too. So, I probably can dig up my ETS date if I wanted to, but, what'd you decide to do once you got out of, working for Uncle Sam?
Well, I ended up getting married while I was in Europe, and we started a family pretty young. So I had a child once I left the service. So of course the immediate requirement was no longer school and college; it was work.
Yes.
So we relocated to Dallas, and I ended up taking a position with a federal regulatory bank. Called Federal Home Loan Bank of Dallas at the time. They were the people that, back in the 80s regulated all the savings and loans through that crisis,
Mm-hmm.
and took a security kind of role, if you will, there. And within a few weeks, the president of the bank stopped by and just started a conversation with me and kind of asked me about my background and what where I'd come from and what my interests were. And he ended up bringing me on to a much more personal role with him, his home security and doing some other things within the bank there, to the point where he eventually, decided to leave and open up his own savings and loan out in California. And he said, "Will, what do you want to do?" And I said, "Roy," I said, I'd like to be in IT. And so he asked the vice president of IT at that time to take me under his wing and train me and work with me there. So that's the start. That's how I got into it.
Wow. So did you stay with the bank in Texas or did you go to California?
No, I stayed with the bank in Texas.
Okay.
Roy went on and opened his thing. They brought in a new president at the time. I don't recall who that was, but
Mm-hmm.
from that point forward, I was in the IT field and IT space, and I was kind of bored in the beginning with what I was doing from a security perspective. So I would help with some of the desktop PC kind of support work there. But my first real job once I was officially over in IT was doing some analytics, programming, and language work with Focus, product called Focus, and SAS, which I'm sure you've heard of.
I have.
And was able to get go to some training on that and work for the next, I don't know, 6 months or a year in that area before transitioning over to mainframe programming.
Okay. What did you program on the mainframe?
It was COBOL CICS, and this is one of those points in your career where you're extremely, when I look at my career and kind of how things have happened, I'm just very, very thankful for the people there. I mean, obviously, I didn't know anything. I had a great aptitude for these types of things, I think, but I didn't have the knowledge. Of course, I would work twice as hard just to prove myself at that point. If it's supposed to take 8 hours to develop something, then it may take me 16, even though 8 of that's on my own time. I'm going to get it done, kind of thing. So just to work through that. But I was very, very thankful. There were a number of people who took me kind of under their wing, worked with me, trained me, taught me, and especially on the COBOL CICS mainframe programming thing, which was quite the learning curve for me at the time. So
yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. Some of our younger listeners have probably heard myths and tales of all sorts about mainframes, and they're still here and rolling.
Sure.
For sure. So COBOL CICS is still a big thing, not as big as it was, but it's still hanging around, and it's the foundation for a lot of systems, as you know. So
yeah,
that's interesting. How long did you were you there in that kind of capacity at the bank?
I want to say it was 4 years, roughly 3 to 4 years,
Okay.
somewhere. After that, I ended up moving to South Carolina, and it was at a point where my wife and I were going through some personal struggles. She was from South Carolina, and we had separated. She'd moved back here, and we decided to give it a go again. And so I said, you know what, we need to do that. Let's try it. So, kind of just picked up and moved out here without a job at the time. I had again leaned on my former contact at the bank there in Dallas and said, "Hey, Roy, do you know anybody out in South Carolina that might be hiring, or that you could send a note over to?" And he did. None of those panned out, as it were. But ended up interviewing and taking a position for a textile manufacturing company in Orangeburg, South Carolina. So I was living in Charleston and commuting back and forth to Orangeburg for the next few years. And that was an interesting opportunity in that the company was actually immediately reported to a German company, which reported to an umbrella company in France. So, I think I had at the time on my resume that I spoke German, which may have been a bit of a stretch. I did live there for a few years and I could manage a few words. But between the guy that interviewed me and flew in from Germany, and I remember sitting in this conference room, and we liked each other, but his English was about like my German, but somehow we made it through. And maybe it was the language barrier that actually got me hired. I don't know. Maybe it was just dumb luck. But they were looking for somebody to come in and just kind of greenfield start up a completely new data center.
Wow.
Now they did have parent company standards, that they, as far as the hardware and software and application side that they wanted to put in, but from a purely PC networking and data center, heating, cooling, all those things that go with that. That was the first big role or task I had, and of course hiring people there as well. So you kind of lucked into that position as well, and frankly, it was awesome. It was a great experience. A lot of things I hadn't got to touch before. I wanted to touch. A substantial budget to go play with things and get things, and again got to kind of go back to my roots and work with the company out of Europe. So it was a great experience. Very scary at the time, for sure. You've got a young child, for sure.
Yes. I've lived that dream. And then how did you get to Apex? You migrated through a couple of spots and you got to Apex Tool. How did that happen?
After the gig in Orangeburg, the commute there, and I saw it through to completion, but it was time to move on. My wife and I decided that Columbia was probably where we needed to be for her university pursuits. She was working on her PhD at the time. And frankly for raising our child and what have you. So we ended up moving to Columbia, and of course the commute was no better from Columbia than it was from Charleston to Orangeburg. I ended up taking a role at a hospital up there. Found a position at in the medical field, and another area with systems with AS400s, and RPG 400 programming and coding. And again, I'm not sure how I got brought into that at this point, given my lack of experience in that area. But found it, had another great mentor there that helped walk me through and show me the ropes, and those were exciting and fun times for me. Spent a short stint there before I decided I just wanted more and maybe some broader experience, and ended up going into a consulting field, and did 3 years as a consultant, very kind of across the Southeast on a variety of different projects and different companies, which I thoroughly enjoyed. But then at that point, I was looking for something with less travel and to be back home again. And I wound up taking a job for a manufacturing company called Cooper Industries. One of their divisions was headquartered here in Lexington, South Carolina. And that was in 1995. And that was kind of the start of the majority of my career, if you will. I spent 23 years, with, that division or corporate headquarters, or what eventually became Apex Tool Group.
What did you love about the consulting work that you did for that 3-year stint?
I think the freedom to go in and have an audience at the top of the organization, and give your professional opinion, which they're paying for, without any consideration to the political correctness of it, if you will,
Right.
just the facts kind of thing, and I think at some point in my career, you're hampered by, I don't know what it is. Maybe budgets, it may be political motives from other people in an organization you're working in or what have you. But I just liked the true freedom of, number one, the breadth of things you could touch, technology, and the people that you get to work with, and then the number two, just going in there and having that audience at the C-suite level and talking to the decision makers, and presenting them options, and then seeing that to fruition, hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah. That true independence. I don't have a dog in the fight. These are the best
Yep.
options. You pick A, B, or C, and that's your deal. And yeah.
And I'm indifferent, and will help you make those happen.
Yeah. And that's what a good consultant can do, is just, hey, this is the way it lays, and let's see what happens. You eventually became CIO for Apex Tool. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it was a bit of a long process. I started off with one of the divisions, like I mentioned here in Lexington, a tools division, and of course, one of the things facing us almost within the first few years of my time there was this whole Y2K thing, if you recall, and kind of the fears around that, and which kind of drove our strategy at the time, which was to say, we've got this Y2K thing facing us. We bought these other companies. We've got all these different ERP systems out there. Man, wouldn't it be nice to kind of consolidate those, and have one ERP system, and address the Y2K issue, coincidentally at the same time, but have one ERP system where all manufacturing facilities, distribution centers, et cetera, could talk to one another. Know, left hand know what the right hand's doing. So that was one of my largest projects in the beginning, and that was at a time when the ERP system was called SAP, and that was at a time when SAP implementations were having more bad press than good press, and so there were some trying times there, but we were very successful in doing that. And I think from a career turning point, it worked out well for the team, for me personally, for the division leadership at the time, and such that we were asked. Eventually, I was asked to take on a broader role within Cooper Industries, which was headquartered out of Houston at the time. Cooper Industries at that point decided to say, this sounds great to do it at a division level, but why don't we look at this from a corporate level, and do it for all of our divisions worldwide? And they were a large company, $6.5 billion dollar company. I ended up taking a role there where I think the first role I started was with everything outside of the United States. So implementing the non-U.S. locations. And again, one of the highlights of my career, thoroughly enjoyed that, working with different countries, the cultures, the legal requirements, statutory reporting requirements is a completely different animal than what we had done on the domestic side of the things. And so did that for a number of years. And then I think I ended up taking responsibility for all of the implementation efforts, both domestic and international. Did that for a period of a number of years. Took on, the title wasn't CTO, but it's kind of a CTO role for Cooper Industries, and did that for a few years. And then at some point, Cooper decided, well, we're going to split off. We're going to create a joint venture with a company called Danaher. We're going to split off our tools division and their tools division, marry them up. And oh, by the way, we're going to have some Cooper personnel and some Danaher Corporation personnel over there as the new management team. They needed a CIO. I was approached and asked if I was interested. I interviewed for the role and ended up taking it. So from that 2010 timeframe through 2018, I was a CIO for that tool group.
And how big, just to give our listeners some understanding, how global role, multiple facilities, can you give us some sense of headcount and that kind of stuff? Will?
I think with Cooper, we were, I want to say at one point close to 30,000 employees worldwide. Don't quote me on that now. With Apex Tool Group, it was closer to probably 8,000 employees worldwide. I can tell you that between the between my time at Cooper / Apex, I implemented SAP in over 100 countries, though.
Wow.
Some of those may have been just sales and distribution center or sales centers, rather, sales offices. But they were everywhere. It's all throughout the Americas, Europe, Middle East, Africa, Asia Pacific. So it was
Wow.
exciting stuff.
I bet. And tell us, what kind of things are you doing currently?
I'm currently consulting. I guess for the last since 2018, I think it was. Back in that consulting role, loving it. I'm working for a South Carolina state agency that serves kind of our most needy citizens, and very, very exciting and happy to be doing that. When I first took the role, there were a number of projects. In fact, the CIO at the time that offered me the role with my background said, "Well, do you want to play in the application development space, or do you want to play in the infrastructure and operations space?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. I've been doing the application space for quite a while now. Let me go back and play in the infrastructure and operations space." So there was a complete technology uplift, revamp of outsourcing and consolidating data centers, and doing a network technology refresh, and kind of frankly just taking our hardware landscape of 20 plus years old and making it current again. So for the first few years, that occupied a good portion of my time. I was also fortunate enough to get involved in the kind of the state's cloud initiative, and representing, or being one of the representatives from our agency, working with them. And so it's been involved in cybersecurity more than I ever have. Got to work with still getting to work with some really bright people on that front. That was not an area where I really had any significant experience. So that's, again, still learning and still enjoying that.
Let's go back to a couple of things you talked about. Initially, the president of the bank sounds like he kind of took you under his wing, and you became kind of one of his guys, is the way I would term that. So he was probably a mentor for you. Can you talk a little bit about him and maybe some other mentors that kind of helped navigate you through your career thus far, Will?
He was definitely one of my mentors. I think if I take a couple steps back, Barry, there were people I was close to. My high school, there were a couple high school teachers that were significant in my life. Let me take it one step back. My grandparents were probably very significant mentors in my life. We did move to Texas, but I went back to South Dakota and worked on the farm, and during the summers by choice. I loved that lifestyle, loved that peace. Didn't understand why we had to get up at 4 a.m. and listen to the Weather Channel every morning, but now I do. But it was the work ethic there, and the values, and just the moral compass, and so they were a huge influence. A couple teachers in high school were a huge influence, and then person or so in the military. But most of my mentors were close people that became close friends, people that you look at them and you meet them and you immediately respect them. So the people that took me up under their wing, at a time when it's like, who's this kid that wants to encroach on my territory? So,
well, let's go back a little bit in your story. One of the themes of our podcast and the conversations that we've had with leaders from around the country is there seems to be a fairly clear transition point, pivot point, Will, where somebody went from being a hands-on IT practitioner doing the work, whether it's coding or taking care of security or hardware, what have you, and they moved into management, or what I would call leadership. So can you talk to us about that transition from hands-on practitioner to being a leader?
I don't think it was an overnight kind of thing, Barry. I think it just happened over time. I think for me, it probably happened during those late 90s, early 2000s time frame where we were doing great things and getting a lot of exposure and visibility for better or for worse during that time, and being kind of thrust into those leadership roles, and people at the top of the food chain now looking at you and having, I don't know if the respect's the right word, but certainly paying more attention to you and what you're accomplishing and doing that, and then inviting you into more of the strategic discussions, going forward, in the boardroom kind of thing. So it was a gradual thing over time, at least in my case.
Yeah. No, I think it is for most people. I don't think it's a black and white transition, turn off, turn on. I think it does kind of baby steps is the way I call it sometimes. Yeah. Let me ask you something different. When you were a young IT professional, what's something that you undervalued at that point in your life that you very much highly value now?
Without a question, relationships with others. And when I say that, I mean, certainly, and I hate to say this, but it's kind of the truth. If it benefited me at the time and I saw something for me out of it, that I could gain, then it's like, sure, you want to have those relationships. But just relationships, Barry, for the sake of having relationships in general,
right?
I just it did not value or did not see the value at the time of those. And as I've gone through my life and my career, and that's probably true in my personal life as well. Sure. To be honest, I mean, relationships I severely undervalued them, and they mean the world to me now. And frankly, those are the things I think that when we're gone, that will be what people remember.
So let's flip that coin on the other side. What's something that you overvalued when you were younger in your career that you don't kind of think holds much water today?
Title, status, climbing that corporate ladder, and using that as the measure of success, I think. So that would have to be it for me.
I heard somebody say a long time ago that most people build their careers trying to climb the corporate ladder, and they realize that when they get to the top, the ladder's on the wrong wall.
Right. And it's very lonely at the top. Right.
Yes. It can be. That's for sure. Yeah. So what's your proudest professional accomplishment?
I am very proud of the work that the team that we did, at a time with the ERP implementations, at a time things weren't going well for many companies. If you picked up any of the trade regs at the time, you could just read about horror story after horror story. So I'm very proud of those. But I think as far as what is fulfilling to me, Barry, and if I look back in my career, and I can't point to any one person, but there are several people that I've developed along the way that have come to me, or that I've taken in from outside of IT, or from within, but also from outside of IT, that were in other areas of the business or had careers that weren't fulfilling or as lucrative, as what they eventually became to be in IT. So that development of people has been probably my most rewarding experience, period, in my career. And it's happened on multiple occasions. And frankly, maybe it's a pay it forward and pay it backward kind of thing, right? Because people took me in under their wing at a time when they didn't have to. And for whatever reason, that's just been very fulfilling to me.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things about my job as a recruiter, talent acquisition person, is to take somebody who maybe is not in IT or is in the wrong job and convince, coerce, bully a client to say, "Hey, you got to talk to this guy," and and to see them fly. And I've got an example about 10 or 15 miles from where I sit today, and this guy was a church music pastor, and now he's been promoted 5 times in his IT organization and is making 3 times what he used to make, and just loves the whole gig, and
exactly
changed his life. It's so cool to see that happen,
and to watch their progression as they develop and move through their career and their lives, and how that changes their lives. Honestly, it's very fulfilling.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me ask you the different question on what's one of the more proud moments of you on your personal life? I know you're a very deep family man. You have lots of great friendships around the country. Um, what's a proud personal thing for you, Will?
Man, I mean, my family is what I'm most proud of, right? My relationship with my children, my relationship with my wife, the, I guess the fact that we were able to. I grew up in a in a poorer family, lower middle class, so being able to work hard and provide for them and give them the opportunities, that maybe that some of us, my brothers and I, didn't have. Certainly makes us proud. But I'm just proud of what they've become. That they've.
Mhm.
We're not perfect. My wife and I are not perfect. We're not the best role models at all times, for sure. I don't think most parents are. But listen, through it all, they're all three doing very, very well. And frankly, that's what I'm most proud of.
Yeah. No, I hear you on
Personally.
that. I had the great benefit of knowing your family a little bit, and
Yes, you do. Yeah.
I would agree. They're wonderful. Y'all have done a great job. What are some core principles of yours that kind of you feel like were helpful to you during your journey, both personal and professional? You said curiosity early in your story, and I know your work ethic and that kind of stuff. So I'm just
Work ethic, tenacity, seeing things through, not giving up, um, not being afraid to fail. Very, um, people ask me at times, if you could go back and do it all over again, would you do the same thing? And the answer is kind of yes and no. Yes, I would stay in this field, but I would go back probably and take some more chances, initially early on, and something more entrepreneurial where, try it while you're young in your life. And if you fail, you fail, and pick the pieces up and move on, kind of thing. Whereas I think, at least for me personally, as conservative as I am in some respects, it's just, didn't want to take those chances when I needed that paycheck, to take care
sure,
of the family at some
sure,
point. So,
sure.
but tonight, communication's another core value. When I say communication, it's not so much. I'm speaking more to the listening side of things, right?
Mm,
I've always considered myself a very observant person, somebody who will sit and be quiet in a conference room and just observe and listen and take it all in. So I think that's, for me, it's probably benefited me some. On the flip side, I probably haven't been as good at, on the outgoing side of communications, and reaching out if I didn't have to or didn't need to at the time. So, I think that self-inflection too, just looking at yourself and, what could I do better, learning from those around you.
yeah, that's that curiosity again. I mean,
Yep. Yep. Stay
it's
curious, my friend. That's
stay
right.
curious. It's a good one. Do you have any, based on your experience in all the places that you've been and all the places that you've been successful, do you have any thoughts about where technology's headed, Will?
um, no, I don't. I mean, I'm excited. It is scary and exciting to me, and I can't wait. I wish I were going to be on this planet another 100 years to see. I look back, in my grandparents' time, and then my time here, and then I look at
Mhm.
my children's time here, and what they're not even aware of, and what they're seeing, and what they're going to see. And it's like, I'm very excited for it. I'm not, one of these, like, don't have a crystal ball, and I wouldn't be good at reading it if I did have one, probably. So I just, it's exciting and yeah, maybe a little bit scary, but I can't wait for it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, starting working on hardware and then mainframe and now working on cloud and all the security stuff, you've seen quite the evolution from where it was to where it is. And, if whatever that law is that technology speeds up every 2 years or whatever, I mean, there's a lot of innovation happening, it seems to be right now.
Oh yeah, for sure. And just keeping up with that, is a task in and of itself. And I think, in our field, you have to want to do that. You need to do that if you want to stay relevant, just to stay up on it. and listen, it's a challenge, right? Because the velocity or pace of change is unlike anything I've seen in my career. So it's a challenge for any even any one person, I think, just to see keep up with everything on a holistic level.
Yeah. Talking about keeping up with change, are there certain books that you read, certain where do you get your information from? How do you continue to intellectually sharpen the saw, as they say?
Yeah, it's probably a variety of sources. I do, listen to a ton of audiobooks and read the hard copies in my hands occasionally. But my source of obviously a lot on the internet, right?
Sure.
TED Talks, researching. If I'm at work or I'm in a meeting, and somebody brings up some new word or new term I haven't heard before, I'm gonna go back to my office, or I'm gonna go home, and I'm gonna research that and understand it, and find out it's like, what are they talking about? So I don't, so I do know what they're talking about. I mean, so a ton from there, and I read. I've done, I think, in my career, all of the Stephen Covey kind of books, and all the time management and project management and career and 7 Healthy Habits kind of books. But excuse me, for me, not that personal development's really ever done, but for me, it's more just on the technology front and keeping up with that, which is a full-time job. So,
there's a lot out there. So let me pivot for a second. Tell me how you recharge. How do you kind of keep your batteries in a good place so that you're ready to attack the day, attack the week, attack the month?
Yeah. I've got a couple hobbies, Barry, where you just shut off everything. I will spend time in the shop, working on something, but my passion outside of work is sporting clays and doing some shooting there. So I spend time doing that when I can. Flying, I'm a pilot as well. I don't have an airplane any longer, but there was a period of time when you just head out to the hangar and pull the airplane out and go shoot holes in the air for a while, just to unwind and debrief. So it just, I've got more interest than I have money. So it's there's no shortage of that, but obviously it's always that balance, right? I mean, there's less probably family commitments now than there were when my kids were at home and young.
Sure.
But it's also a pleasure just catching up with them and their progress and their different areas of life throughout the week, kind of thing.
Absolutely. I think it's good. One of the things I realized that we haven't been talking to some of our guests about is how do they recharge? We did a couple of last few times, but I know enough about you to kind of bait you into that question. So,
right.
And I will tell you that I think during COVID, people really connected with, hey, how can I recharge the batteries? And I found my things, and Tracy's found her things, and it's good when people have things. All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy.
Exactly. Yeah. Completely agree, Barry.
Yeah, we all know that.
COVID, in a lot of respects, there was a lot of eye-opening revelations, I think, for a lot of people during that time when you're spending basically 24/7 at home with your spouse, and all that time, and you can reflect on things and you take up things. I took up gardening. I mean, doing some things, sneak out to Home Depot in my mask and get some things and come back and plan them and do it. And of course, all your home improvement projects. But but no, I think you're right. I think COVID did have a much larger impact than just all bad stuff.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. There's a lot of good that came out of it. Did for me, and I think for a lot of other people too. So,
Yes, sir.
So how can we learn more about you or your work, or keep up with Will Sprang as he climbs the next mountain?
There's not much to keep up with, Barry. I mean, you could LinkedIn, I guess, is probably that thing. And if people want to talk or meet, or reach out to me on LinkedIn and have coffee and talk, or set up a meeting and go from there. So
that'd be great. That'd be great. Is there anything, just curious, is there anything I didn't ask you that I should have asked you?
I don't think so, Barry. I can't think of anything else, to be honest.
Okay. Cool. Will Sprang, thank you for giving us insights and sharing your experiences with us. It's very instructive and very helpful. And We just so much appreciate the investment of time that you've given us today. Thank you.
Hey, Barry, thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for your time.
Thanks for joining us today on the Tech Leaders Talk podcast. Learn more about our show at techleaderstalkpodcast.com and follow us on social media. We are Tech Leaders Talk Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and we're on Twitter at TechLeadersPod. Subscribe to our show wherever you get podcasts, and please share this episode with at least one person in your life who would benefit. Until next time, Tech Leaders, keep talking.